What's up, everybody? Back here on another edition of Banter. Another week, another podcast. Just the two of us again today. Myself, Tyler Zulli. My brother, Brandon Zulli. Chris should be back within the next couple of weeks. We'll get him back on here.
Hopefully next week.
Maybe in 2 weeks. I know he's going back to see the doctor relatively soon. As soon as he can drive, I know he's going to be over here. So we'll get it back to a three-man team within the next couple of weeks or so. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But for now, it's just the two of us holding down the fort. We've got a lot to talk about. You know, it seems like every time we get done a podcast, the previous week, we go, all right, let's keep politics out of it next week. Let's do something that doesn't involve politics. And every week, Donald Trump never fails to give us something to talk about.
Indeed. And this week was probably, besides the attacks, was probably the biggest thing he's done.
The biggest news, I think. Well, and let me ask you this. Before we even get into this topic, what's your take on some politicians, and I'll say politicians, and I won't say Republicans or Democrats, I'll say politicians, saying, oh, climate change isn't real?
I think they are absolute idiots. And I can't say idiots, actually, because they've had this worldview for so long.
Misinformed?
Yes.
Probably the better word to use?
Yes. They've had this worldview for so long, and when something eventually comes to conflict with that worldview, their brain can't handle it, right. And they just go, this is a lie. This is absolutely false. It's called, I think it's called social dissonance.
Okay.
And it's actually quite fascinating while disturbing at the same time, because these are the people in power not doing anything about this actual thing that's going to eventually destroy the human race.
All right, well, let's get into this. I'm sure I know you probably know what we're getting into by now, but we want to talk about the Paris Agreement and President Donald Trump backing the United States out of the Paris Agreement, at least for now. And he said he's willing to renegotiate, but when 99.9% of the countries say yes to this agreement, renegotiating really is not going to happen. But the Paris Agreement is something, in case you don't know what it is, we'll explain it to you. It's something that came out in November of 2016, and it committed 197 nations to a goal of holding global temperature rise to, quote, well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It also is trying to cut net greenhouse gas emissions to zero by the second half of the century. So by 2050, they're looking to have zero gas emission for greenhouse gas emissions. So we talk about it now. Now we're here June of 2017, and 194 countries, 195 countries if you count Taiwan, have agreed to this Paris Agreement. 3 have not.
It's almost Earth minus us.
Syria, Nicaragua, who thought it wasn't strong enough. That's the reason they didn't sign it. And the United States of America,
who don't want it at all. Well, no, they do want it.
President Trump doesn't
One person doesn't want it.
And here's the thing about the Paris Agreement. There are really not a whole lot of legal binding guidelines or laws. They're really more kind of a check. It's like a check and balance on each other.
The whole Paris Agreement, there's no orders. It's all optional.
Right. It's
so
just...
in not signing, you're taking away any option to just do this. It's, oh, we don't care about that. Some people might not even do it, even if they sign it.
Right. Well, and it's basically a way to check on China, to check on India, to check on the United States, to follow through on their commitment to, you know, be globally and climate-wise be productive. So what is the basis of Donald Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement?
Idiocy.
Is that all? Is that all it is?
No, I highly doubt that's all it is, but that's just all I can see. Because it's complete moronic ego. I think he said in Pittsburgh that if he had signed it, it would have taken away jobs and it would have made us economically fragile, which I believe it would have done the opposite of both of those things.
Well, and he's all about creating jobs, which is one of the reasons I think a lot of people voted for him, and it's one of the reasons I backed him, because he was all about creating jobs, and it's what the country needs is jobs. But this doesn't do that for me, because
actually, China apparently is welcoming any engineer or scientist who wants to work on this problem come over to China and start doing some jobs for them. So he's creating jobs, just not for the right country.
Not in our country. Well, and here's the thing that blows my mind. Donald Trump can declare his intentions, with air quotes, to withdraw the United States out of this agreement at any time. But here's the caveat. The U.S. cannot officially and legally withdraw from the Paris Agreement until November 4th, 2020. So why is this such a big thing for Donald Trump and for everybody in this country that, hey, Donald Trump wants to pull out of the Paris Agreement, he doesn't believe in climate change or global warming or whatever it is, if he can't pull out until 2020, which by then... He's going to be almost out the door.
He's hopefully not going to be president.
Well, and that's the thing. If he obviously has a chance to win again. He's going to run again, and he's likely going to get the Republican nomination. Very infrequently do you see an incumbent not get the nomination if they are seeking it. If it's sought after. Which is
strange because everyone was denouncing Trump at the beginning of this political race.
But, so, it's going to be 2020 by the time Donald Trump could officially pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement voluntarily. If he tries to pull it out, before that, it'd be in violation, here's what they say, in violation of international law, and would, quote, this is from a site called earthjustice.org, so obviously they're one-sided, but it would gravely undermine the rest of the world's trust in the United States as a negotiating partner, incurring major diplomatic blowback that could hinder corporations on multiple strategic issues such as security and trade. So not only is Donald Trump saying, we as a country, he's picking all of us up, he's enveloping all of us into this category when it's really just him and his cronies, basically. Saying that we don't believe in climate change. He also could screw the country in further agreements from here on out.
Well, it's not just him and his cronies. Think of who else is going to prosper from this. Like, he said that there was a giant war on coal. Do you really think there is?
There's a war on coal? Mm-hmm. There is not a war on coal. There is no coal left.
Exactly. So, who's going to prosper from this? Oil companies.
Saudi Arabia. Iran. Yemen.
So, why do this?
Because he wants the money.
Exactly.
It's what it all comes down to. It's all about money, people. And that's how you have to look at it. And I don't blame him, and I don't think many people blame him.
Everyone
this
wants
world
more money.
Is about money, and it's about making more, and at the end of the day, you know what you're going to try to do again? Make more. And that's what it's about. And if I'd be lying to you if I said I blame the guy for wanting more money.
Everyone wants money.
Everyone
loves money.
But when you're in a position of public interest, you have hundreds of millions of people to think about in your country, in your borders alone, and billions of people worldwide that now won't trust you. I think you have to get your priorities in order. This is because at the end of the day, what is the presidency? It's a public service.
Yes.
You signed on for this, and you drew people into you by saying, I am Donald Trump, and I have millions and billions of dollars. Therefore, I'm not going to take the $400,000 salary that the president gets during my term in office. Okay, that's great. I appreciate it. Where's that money going? Because at the end of the day, what's the difference if you took $400,000 or not? Mm-hmm. It's just more money. Here's one thing I kind of want to get at that really kind of blew my mind on this whole Paris Agreement thing. We said that 194 or 195 countries
Everyone but three
countries have signed this agreement, or have at least signed it, and nearly 150 of them have ratified it. Do you know if It's not the United States, it's not Syria, and it's not Nicaragua. You know what that means? What country did sign this?
North Korea?
North Korea signed this Paris Agreement. And in fact, based on this chart, North Korea ratified the Paris Agreement. So what you're going to tell me is a whack job, psychopath, genocidal, killing his own people for fun, leader, dictator, supremacist is telling you you're doing something wrong?
Usually that's a good thing, like you said earlier.
Right. Usually you go, well, if he says this, I'm going to do the opposite. But right now, in this situation, if North Korea is saying you might want to sign the Paris Agreement, I think you might want to sign the Paris Agreement.
I never thought I'd ever say this, but Trump, just think, what would Kim Jong-un do?
That's scary to say. Very, very scary to say. The fact that you are banking on North Korea. Here you go. In this article from BusinessInsider.com, it legitimately says even Palestine and North Korea signed it.
And we don't. And we have a president who says this is going to destroy our country.
Right. And here's the thing. Like we said earlier, Nicaragua didn't sign it because they thought it didn't go far enough. And Syria, who currently is in the middle of a civil war and I think has more important things on their hands, didn't participate.
And then there's us.
And then there's the United States.
With the Oompa Loompa, tiny hand, egotistical munchkin leading our country.
And here's the biggest problem, and I didn't realize this. Barack Obama ratified the U.S. adoption of the agreement back in September of 2016. However, he did not submit it to Congress for approval. That's how Trump's able to cancel this. It's, because it was only a presidential action and not a congressional signing, Trump can just cancel this. And that's the beauty of our country.
But he had to do that because if he didn't, it was never going to get through when Obama was president.
You're absolutely right. And that's the beauty of our country. It's also the downfall of our country.
Beauty, democracy, I would not say is the right word.
Democracy at its finest right there. And, well, maybe not even democracy because we don't have a say in this. It's a presidential order. So maybe not democracy, but the changing of the guards is a beautiful thing in this country. You can only have 8 years as president. Well, you can have 10 technically, but that's if by major circumstances, but that's not what we're getting at. You can have 2 terms elected as president. After that, you're done, and you become a civilian again. And the next guy comes in, or the next woman comes in whenever we get a woman president, comes in and says, well, I don't agree with this, so this is what I'm going to do. And then 8 years later, the next person comes in and says, well, I don't agree with that, and I'm going to bring it back. That's the great thing about our country, but it's also a downside to our country.
I like to think of it as just order within chaos. It's complete nonsense, and nobody knows when it's going to stop.
It's Zen. It is the exact form of Zen. It's black within white and white within black. It's really all it is.
I'm trying to wrap my head around any other reason besides it was a monetary gain for Trump himself for him to even think about disagreeing with this.
Well, and here's a quote from CNN. He said, I was elected by the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. This isn't about the people of Paris. This is about the people of the world. We have one big guy, and when it's gone, it's gone. We're not going to ship a bunch of spaceships off to Mars and live there or live on the moon. This isn't a science fiction movie. It's how life works. And I know, here's the thing. I'm a big believer when it comes to, especially when it comes to sports. And I know this is a little off the topic. But here's the thing. When it comes to a sporting event, when you sit here and you say, well, give you an example. The Phillies are bad right now, right? They're really, really bad. And people are saying, oh, well, the minor leagues, they're going to be, the minor leaguers that are down in the farm right now are going to be good. And they're going to come up, they're going to get better and better and better. And they'll make the major league team. And they're going to get better. And the Phillies will eventually be better. I don't live for eventually when it comes to sports. Because if you're not winning right now, you're doing something wrong. And I think Trump is taking that same mantra into politics and into world affairs. And while, yes, we need to better the world for ourselves, you also have to think, our generation, which is a step down from Trump's generation, is coming into the age where we're starting to have children. So now we're 2 generations removed from Donald Trump's generation. He'll be dead within the next 20 years, likely.
He won't have to deal with anything.
He's 70-something years old. He'll die within the next 20 to 30 years at most. But it leaves us. In 20 to 30 years, at most, we're going to be in our early 50s. Our children, who are yet to be born, will be in their teens. And we have to pass down a world to them. They then, in turn, have to pass down a world to their children, and their children, and their children. At some point, there's not going to be anything left to pass down. And this Paris Agreement is a great, great deal that Donald Trump is just not seeing clearly because it's not a, quote, American thing.
I would like to, once again, emphasize that everything in the Paris Agreement is all optional. Nothing is binding. We said it was binding until 2020, but any of the action taken are all completely optional.
Well, and it's not that it's binding, it's just the participation within it is binding. You don't have to do any of this.
And like you said, it would just harm us in the long run with later deals and obviously fucking killing the planet. I apologize for that.
Well, here's the deal. China is investing upwards of $300 billion in renewable power sources, such as solar, wind, whatever, by 2020. China, again, is one of the world's leading pollutants, one of the world's leading users of renewable gas and greenhouse gas.
You have to wear a mask in the
right.
cities.
And if China is making these moves, again, you have to compare it to another country. If China is making these moves, what's holding the United States back?
One man. Donald Trump.
That's all it is. Let's finish up this segment real quick. We're going to shift gears a little bit and bring it back home because there's laws starting to be enacted and laws starting to be introduced that are being introduced in the country that are going to make things a little bit more dicey, make things a little bit more complicated. And this one comes from NBC News. Hawaii became the first state, and this happened a few days ago, became the first state to enact law to align goals with Paris Climate Accord. Now, granted, a state law, obviously in the hierarchical system, is lower than a federal law. But if Donald Trump's not making laws, he's just saying, I'm not agreeing with the Paris Agreement and we're not going to sign it, Hawaii has every right to say, well, guess what? We believe in it, so we're going to make laws that kind of coincide with the Paris Agreement. And if Trump doesn't make a federal law denouncing it, he can't do anything about it. And Hawaii's going to put themselves in a position where they can make their own laws and make their own state laws to make the state, at least, a better climate area.
And that's why it's important to concentrate not only on presidential elections, but every kind of election you have. Because I liked your analogy before of minor leaguers coming up to major league. Minor league may not be important in baseball, but it's definitely important in politics. Because I believe one of our state senators had said that climate change is due to the Earth getting closer to the sun each year, and our body temperatures would heat up the planet.
Let me ask you something. Neither of us are science experts.
No.
But I think both of us are knowledgeable enough in science to know not only is that statement false, but it's actually the exact polar opposite. One of the first things you're taught when you learn about the solar system and the planets is that what? It's ever expanding, right? Which means that technically it's pulling away from the sun. And it's pulling away from the sun at a very, very, very slow rate.
Yes.
Nothing that's going to influence our lifetime, our children's lifetime, our children's children's lifetime.
But you know what will? CO2 levels.
Correct.
I think we're going to have to move on to the next subject, Tyler.
Well, and let's wrap this up real quick because I've got a couple of more stats for you. Hawaii passed this bill into law, or at least enacting law, so they're on their way. There are at least a dozen other states, including Hawaii, or a dozen states, that are including Hawaii, have signed pledges to continue to reduce their fossil fuel emissions, in spite of the fact that Donald Trump is saying that the Paris Agreement is whatever. So we're looking at New York, California, Washington, Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, and obviously Puerto Rico is not a state, but Puerto Rico is a province of the United States,
yes.
a territory of the United States, and they're agreeing on it as well. So you have, even if you exclude Puerto Rico and you have New York 1, California 2, Washington 3, Connecticut 4, Delaware 5, Massachusetts 6, Minnesota 7, Oregon 8, Rhode Island 9, Vermont 10, Virginia 11, and Hawaii 12. So it is a dozen states. 12 out of 50. You're looking at almost a quarter of the states. Just under a quarter of the states. 25% of the states that you govern that are within your sovereign nation disagree openly about your policies. And that's not to include...
And it's only been, a week?
It's been a week. It's been 6 days. That's not to include the states that are probably sitting there and saying, grumble, 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 grumble. He's not right. Grumble, grumble, grumble. But we're going to keep our mouth shut for now.
For now.
It's
only been a week.
Right. And things could get worse for Mr. Donald Trump as the weeks go on. So we'll check back in on that as things kind of continue.
We'd like to say next week we're not going to talk about something like this.
But we can't promise
anything. But it's not going to happen.
It's probably not going to happen. And unfortunately, every time that we have and that's the thing with doing a week, once a weekly podcast, is you get 6 full days to really take everything in and see what the top story is. Now, right now, every time the top story seems to involve Donald Trump. And I think it's going to continue until he figures out that gets a balance at least. He is the president of the United States. And as the president of the United States, I will respect the man for doing a job that's one of the hardest jobs in the country. Maybe the hardest job.
Do you think he actually does anything in that job?
I don't want to give him credit or discredit him for doing or not doing anything in that job. However, I think he needs to find a happy medium because right now he's just trying to appease Republican because he just wants a second term.
Exactly.
All right, let's head to another commercial break. On the other side, we'll get to my rant. We've got a couple of discussions on movies, on some entertaining news, and we'll finish up with a little bit more of a light-hearted segment like we always like to. We'll take a quick break. This is Baron Banter. Thanks for joining us once again here on Baron Banter. Tyler Zulli alongside Brandon Zulli, my brother and partner in crime here on this podcast every single week. We have a couple of outlets you can find us on. Find us on Twitter at Easy Mode Earls. That'll give you a link to our YouTube page as well, where you can find all our content, not just this podcast, but Brandon and Devin and Paul and whoever else is a cycling...
Jesse, you, Weibel.
Whoever else is the cycling group of traveling circus performers. We'll play some games. We'll do some commentary. We'll have a lot of fun. Let's get to my rant now. Let me make it a little bit more lighthearted. I'm going to get a little bit angry. That seems to be the common theme of our show. We have this opening segment where it's like political and we talk and it's supposed to be commentarial, and then we get angry and you're sitting here eating an apple while we're trying to do a podcast. That's my rant for the day. Spit that piece out.
I apologize. I'm so used to being with Devin. We eat, we drink, we do whatever the hell we feel like. I forgot there are standards with our podcast. I greatly apologize for that.
It's all right, big guy. I'm just messing with you. Let's get to my rant of the week. Because yesterday, I was hanging out with our good friend Chris. Going to visit him, check up on him, see how he's feeling. And we watched a movie. And he and I are both big history buffs. We like our history. We like our historical facts and whatnot. So we put this movie on thinking this is right up our alley for both of us. And the movie was called The Free State of Jones. And I'm not sure if you've seen the movie yet. It's starring Matthew McConaughey. Surrounds the Civil War. It's actually a movie put in the perspective of the Confederate Army and Confederate civilians down in the Mississippi area, the Alabama area down there, which you don't really get to see too much.
No.
However, here's my problem with this movie, and here's my problem with a lot of movies that are historical or that are trying to tell a real deep story, And my problem with this story, or this movie, is it was a 2.5-hour movie. All well and good. I know when I go to see a historical movie or something along those lines, it's going to be a little bit longer. They have to develop backstories. They have to explain to you what happened, because I know what happened in the Civil War because I'm a history buff. But a lot of people don't. They just go for the action or whatever. They go to see Matthew McConaughey in a new movie. I get it. But my problem with these 2.5-hour movies is when you spend the first hour and 15 minutes basically doing nothing. It was a drug out, really grind your teeth to make it to this point movie. So we watched about an hour and 15 minutes. So we were about halfway through. And we decided, this movie's kind of boring. It's really slow. We're going to turn it off. So we hang out. We do our thing. I leave. Chris texts me the next day and says, dude, that movie that we watched, you know how it was kind of boring in the beginning? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, man, we should have stuck it out because it was awesome in the end. The last hour or so was awesome. They did this, that, and the other thing, and it was so much fun to see. And I said, well, damn it. Why did we not watch the whole movie? And I went, well, it's probably because it was boring as hell for the first hour and 15 minutes. So that's my big problem for the week. And you can tell that I must have had a pretty good week if I didn't really have a problem. My big problem for the week is, why do movies have to drag things out and pick on every little detail for the first hour and 15 minutes and make me want to fall asleep and not finish the movie, and then for the last hour hit me with all the action?
Most movies like that are really not trying to go straight action. They're trying to envelop you in their world, trying to give you as much detail and character development so you can be placed in the movie. And then once the action does hit, it's that much better. But it has an adverse effect on someone like you. If it's too slow, you'll just stop before any of the action happens.
Well, and I get that. And here's the problem. I want rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. A good example of rise and fall, keep you on the edge of your seat and then kind of bring you back down and then put you on the edge of your seat, is the Batman series. Mm-hmm. I think The Dark Knight, especially The Dark Knight, the second of the trilogy, while Batman Begins does it fairly well and The Dark Knight Rises does it fairly well, I think The Dark Knight does a great job of introducing you to backstories and new characters, all while keeping you on the edge of your seat and entertained throughout. Now, granted, that's good directing and great acting, maybe one of the best villains of all time, keep you on the edge of your seat with Heath Ledger's Joker. Now, movies aren't going to be as good as The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, to me, in the span of cinematic history, might be a top 10 movie all time. Mm-hmm. It's that good. And I get that not all movies are going to be like that, but I have a massive problem with movies that are just, you're sitting there with your head in your hand waiting for something to happen. Then you have 30 seconds of action, and then it's another 15 minutes of just sitting there watching character development and watching the story development, and then in the last hour they pound you with a whole bunch of stuff when you may have already turned it off, you may have lost interest, you may have picked up something else, picked your laptop up and started doing some work, or anything along those lines. I've got a problem with the fact that they don't give you continual small bits of action, and they give you an hour's worth of action at the very end.
Now, I have a question for you. What do you feel about the flip side of that? Like, all action, no development.
Well,
Take a Transformers movie.
That's a problem, too. You have a lot of Michael Bay movies that are just blow things up and blow things up and blow things up. They're incredible action, and it's fun to watch cars get blown up and people get, cities get ravaged and things like that. But at the end of the day, you walk out and you go, I don't even know what they were doing. I don't even know what they were fighting. I don't know what they were going after.
Was there a story?
Was there a storyline? And the answer is probably not. You need to find good common middle ground. And that's why, again, I bring up The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight developed and kept you on the edge of your seat at the same time. Because Batman, there were a ton of explosions and there were a ton of fighting sequences. But at the same time, there were scenes where, let's say the Joker was sitting in the jail cell. You learned about the Joker, and obviously you know who the Joker is through the history of Batman, but you learned about the Joker's insanity all while Batman was slamming his head off a table. Mm-hmm. It was a great combination of the two. And I think The Free State of Jones and a lot of historical movies miss that mark. Now, here's the thing. You could take a movie, compare it to Saving Private Ryan, and that hits you in the face. I mean, that literally punches you in the face with action as soon as the movie starts. I mean, you get hundreds of dead people within the first 15 minutes of the movie. But, so it gives you that, it gets you right into the action, then it explains things a little bit, and then it starts to pick up the action again. But Saving Private Ryan's almost a 3-hour movie, and I never once felt bored watching the movie. I felt bored watching The Free State of Jones.
Now, what about, let's take another film, another war film of Inglourious Bastards. There's maybe a minute and a half of action, and the rest of it is just dialogue.
Inglourious Bastards uses a tool in cinematic development that's very, very difficult to master, but if you get it right, it works to perfection.
What is that?
Flashbacks.
Like the beginning of the movie.
Exactly. Like when they flash back to the Bear Jew coming out for the first time. Or when they flash back to whatever they flash back to. They do a great job of giving you cinematic depth all while explaining the story and keeping you involved.
Yet there's only a
There's very bit of action. And that it all comes down to, does the director do a good job and do the actors do a good job of portraying a story and keeping you entertained with very little action? And I don't know, maybe if Matthew McConaughey just didn't do a good job of that, or they purposely back-ended it, but it was boring for me.
Now, another movie I would have to say is one of my top 10, at least top 5, with very little action, at least that you see, is in Jaws. You never see the shark until the last 5 minutes, and the only time you see action, if it can be called that, is Quint shooting a harpoon in its side and them chasing it down. And then the rest is just dialogue between the 3 men on the boat.
Well,
and still my favorite scene to this day is not an action scene or anything like that. It's Quint's explanation about how he was on the Indianapolis.
Well, and again, I think you use Jaws, you look at suspenseful. And Jaws got really, really lucky. Because I think we should all know the backstory of Jaws at this point, is that the shark was supposed to be involved significantly more.
But then it broke down.
And then it broke down and broke down and broke down.
So they had the idea of the yellow barrels.
And the yellow barrels came out. You had just the fin working. It actually made it more scary and more suspenseful. And they got lucky. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. But, again, Jaws did a good job of keeping you entertained while explaining storyline. Them singing, piss drunk, when he's explaining the Indianapolis, and then they sing. Whatever scene you want to refer to, as a really enjoyable, not enjoyable because obviously Indianapolis is a scary subject, but entertaining and thought-provoking scene. I feel like I said, The Free State of Jones just didn't do it. And a lot of movies that are drug out that are 2.5 hours long don't do it either. Mm-hmm. I think that's all I've got on this segment on this week's rant. We'll head to another commercial break. On the other side, Brandon's got his weekly question for us. Maybe we won't get as angry as the first 2 segments. We'll see how it goes. Stay tuned for the other side of Baron Banter. Halfway through episode 4 of Baron Banter, here from our exclusive basement studios in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. Tyler Zulli, Brandon Zulli here. We got through my rant, we hit our political note, so I think it's time for you to throw our question. We've kind of developed this formula where we have an open segment, and then I do my rant, and then the third segment is you kind of throw a question out to us. So you got something on your mind you want to talk about this week?
My question this week, I saw something on the news last night. I don't remember
news.
The news.
Dun.
Yeah,
That's still a thing?
The well of depression and anger. I can't remember if it was local to us or if it was something that happened and everyone was talking about it. But apparently, a school bus driver, had harassed and berated one of his passengers for an hour. Pulled over the bus and screamed at him for an hour.
How old was the kid?
He was definitely in middle school or at least freshman year. He didn't look older than that, and they didn't say. My question is, and apparently the kid had been upsetting, I believe, another passenger. My question is, was the bus driver in the right? Should he be reprimanded? Or should we even be talking about this?
Well, first thing I'm going to do is sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you. See, my thing is here, I think the action taken, I have no problem with. Because to me, the school bus driver, from the time that bus driver picks you up to the time they drop you off at school, and the time they pick you up at school and drop you off at your bus stop, they're an extension of the school. Mm-hmm. And as a child, when you leave home and you go to school and you're in school, you have to listen to the teacher, right? You have to listen to the principal, right? I think the bus driver is an extension of school. So I've got no problem if they're going to sit there and reprimand a child for, being disrespectful, causing problems, standing on the bus, being, talking back to the bus driver. I've got no problem with that whatsoever.
And I think the biggest thing was, to me, he didn't touch the kid at all. He just yelled at him a lot.
Right, and that's the thing.
He called him dirty names. He called him a crybaby.
Is that dirty?
Dirty, in the words of the news.
That's dirty?
To the news, yes. But he never laid a hand on the kid. Like, he got close to him. Like, he got into his face. But
so are they more concerned about the duration of the
I would have to
screaming?
I would have to believe that they were worried about how long it took, because apparently the news said that it took an hour for him to stop yelling.
Well, and I have two problems with the duration more than anything. The first one is, are there other kids still on the bus? Because the thing is, you're impeding on every other family to yell at this kid. If you want to, give him a quick talking to, send him a note home, or whatever, but you have to understand that, little Johnny is being a troublemaker and you're going to yell at him, but Billy, Bob, and Joe all have to get home to their parents. And their parents are likely waiting at the bus stop, or they have somebody waiting at the bus stop to walk them home, or they're walking, the duration of the bus stop to their house. This is impeding on every other family. Like I said, I've got no problem with the kid being called out and reprimanded for something that he did. If he clearly was in the wrong, he needs to be told he was in the wrong. Mm-hmm. But the problem I have is the impediment on every other family.
Now, my second question was, should he be reprimanded?
The bus driver?
Yes.
For what?
For yelling at the kid for...
oh my God, you've got to be kidding me.
Apparently...
Are people talking about him being...
I believe he was given an extended, leave of work.
Well, like a paid suspension?
I don't know if it was paid.
See, no, I've got a huge problem with that, because nowadays you have kids and parents, kind of baiting these kids into believing that they're perfect, that they're little angels, that they're godsend, that they can't do anything wrong. Well, here's the deal. If your kid does something wrong, your kid did something wrong. And whether you reprimand them, or the bus driver yells at them, or both, which it probably should be, and I can tell you, in our house, the bus driver would have not only yelled at us, but our parents would have yelled at us. Because guess what? The bus driver is going to send a letter home, or the school is going to send a letter home and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Zulli, Brandon or Tyler is being disrespectful on the bus, causing problems for other children, causing problems for the bus driver. And you know what they would have said? What the hell's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. Stop being a punk. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's like... nowadays it's like
delicate snowflakes.
It's like,
they're so
well,
my
kid
way.
couldn't have done anything wrong. My kid is perfect. No, your kid's a little sleazeball, and he was being a sleazeball.
There's no perfect kid anywhere.
There's never been a perfect kid.
And if you think that your kid is perfect, you're an idiot.
Or you're completely oblivious to all the situations around you. Mm-hmm. Here's the deal: you can have great kids. I think for the most part, you and I stayed out of trouble.
Yes.
We weren't troublesome kids. We did our fair share of,
we
annoyance. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that when I was 17 and 18 that I said I was going to hang out with the guys and I was going to hang out with my girlfriend and stay at her place for the night.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. But it wasn't like we were causing commotion and problems in school.
Never got arrested.
Right, never got arrested, never got booked for anything. But at the same time, there's a level of respect that you have to have that, yeah, we messed around on the bus. Absolutely messed around on the bus.
And we got told by
And when the bus driver said, sit your ass down, we sat down.
And we didn't say nothing about it. There was no news. There was no news story about a bus driver yelling at us. It was sit your ass down, and then the next time, 15 times I told you to sit down.
We had a wacko bus driver.
We heard that.
But
we knew it was time to sit down and shut up.
Sit down and shut up, more importantly. But, I've got a major problem if they're going to punish this bus driver. Like I said, the time period may be a little bit excessive because it's a problem for every other kid on that bus and every kid on that bus family and guardian or parents.
If he'd done it for 5 minutes, there should be no story.
Well, there's not news. It's not news.
It's not news at all, even with it being an hour.
But at the end of the day, I like to say the next generation. They're really not the next generation. They're just the younger part of our generation.
Yes.
I think our generation spans from anybody that's, in their 30s now to somebody that's in their early teens. Mm-hmm. That's our generation,
yes.
And the next one's coming soon because people my age are having kids. I mean, people your age are having kids too, but it's an acceptable thing at 23, 24 years old to start a family and have kids. So this is, the span of our generation. I think you cut it off probably, honestly, at my age, maybe a little bit younger. I think even your age, which is only 3 years younger than me and down, got this weird, somehow self-appointed free pass that my age and up didn't get, where you didn't get berated you didn't get punished for things you did wrong. It was, we can't yell at them because that will hurt their self-esteem. And it goes back to everybody deserves a trophy for participating. No, they don't.
Now,
winners win, losers lose. And if you get in trouble, you deserve to get in trouble.
It's back again to Snowflake Nation. Everyone is so delicate and so anything will set them off. Everything is harmful.
Well, they get their feelings hurt about everything.
To self-esteem, and just it shouldn't be.
You're right. I completely agree.
Back again to our third topic on our first episode. Back to what makes a joke go too far.
It's personal opinion.
It's personal opinion. But the personal opinion nowadays is everything is horrible. And it shouldn't be.
Well, and you can't treat my kid like that. He deserves to be given the world. Listen, America has always been the land of opportunity. But it's not the land of I'm going to give you a free pass and let you do whatever you want. You get your opportunity. Sure, everybody deserves a chance.
Yeah.
And it needs to be an equal chance on an equal playing field, and those who work hard ascend, and those who don't fail. Now all of a sudden it's my kid is better than everybody else, or my kid is my little angel sent from the great beyond to, they shouldn't be yelled at when they need to get in trouble, which is ridiculous.
And another thing is why everyone gets so sensitive about this. Every kid nowadays is diagnosed and strapped down with all these kind of disorders that they have. And
what kind of 2-year-old has OCD or ADHD? It's not a thing that early.
Medicated up the wazoo. Then whenever somebody fucking goes off on them, apologize for that. They go, you can't yell at them. They have a disorder. They're excitable.
They're 3 and 4 and 5 and 6.
I think there was a comedian who was talking about this who said he would never give his kids any kind of medicated drugs. And he goes, well, he needs to be medicated. Why not? Why? Well, he doesn't pay attention. What are you teaching him? Erosion. What's that? Some dirt gets washed over by rock, or some dirt gets washed over by water. A little bit dirt goes away. Really? He's not interested in that? No shit.
Yeah.
He's
really.
6.
Nobody cares.
He wants to go ride his bike and crap his pants. He ain't got ADHD. He's bored.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And I think our next generation is going to be raised by two very distinct type of people.
It's the people who notice it like us and will raise them right, and the people who were raised this way and will think nothing of it and raise their kids the same way.
It's going to be, and I guess that's probably what makes Republicans and Democrats. But we'll leave it at that. We'll head to our final commercial break. On the other side, we've got one final topic for you today. Let's have some fun with it. We'll make it a little bit of a more light-hearted segment as we finish things up here on episode 4 of Banter. Final segment here for episode 4 of Banter. Tyler Zulli alongside Brandon Zulli. We talked movies a little bit earlier today. I think we're going to double down and talk a little bit more movies. We're going to get a little bit more specific this time. We're going to give you our top 3 movie bad guys of all time. So they could be bad guys, they could be villains. If you're talking the horror genre, they could be the killer. Whatever you really think is the antagonist of the movie. And who what has the best role as an antagonist, the villain, the killer, the anti-hero, whatever you want to talk about here. So, do you want to start, or you want me to start here?
I think you should go first.
All right, how about we do this? We'll do it. I'll give you 3, you give me 3. I'll give you 2, you give me 2. I'll give you 1, you give me 1. Okay. We'll do it that way. Okay, so number 3 for me, a little bit off the grid, but a movie you and I watched together for the first time about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, and we both sat there and went, oh my God, what just happened? And that is Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Christian Bale does such a fantastic job of portraying a inward psychotic killer when he's with people in normal day, and then as soon as he gets them in his element, isolated by themselves, that's when he, does the creepy dancing, and he's listening to music, and he hacks people.
And the Lewis.
Yeah, Huey Lewis and the News.
Huey Lewis and the News.
He loves this Huey Lewis, and it's just this odd portrayal of a character that you don't really see from a bad guy. He's not an outward, just a wear black, kill everything that moves bad guy, but he is a very inward psychopath, and I think American Psycho works really well for him.
I think the best part of that, the weirdest part actually of the movie, is the ending. Was it all true? Was it in his head?
Nobody knows.
Or is it just that it's so that Patrick Bateman in society is so bland, no one would believe that he would actually do it.
And maybe that's his genius of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good pick for number 3.
So that's my number 3. What do you got for number 3?
My number 3 is Lord Voldemort from the Harry Potter series.
Okay.
And I was trying to put him higher on the list, but I honestly couldn't compared to the other two because he fails to take over a high school. I mean, you're supposed to be the lord of all dark magic and just the epitome of evil and viciousness. And yet teenagers...
You can't kill teenagers.
Teenagers with sticks defeat you. How... I mean, from the first 4 movies, it was amazing. He was always there, always in the background. You didn't know how he was going to get back into it. And then he comes back in the 4th book all creepy and ghost looking. And then from there on, he just becomes some weirdo with no nose. That's how I saw him in those.
And he just continually loses.
Yeah. It's like the first one, I mean, it's Harry's introduction to the world, another magic world. So he beats him because he was stuck on Quirrell's head.
Right.
Second one, it was a memory of him. He couldn't physically harm Harry. Third one, he's not even there. 4th one, he comes back, and Harry gets away by the skin of his teeth. And then the 5th one, it's Dumbledore. 6th one, it's Dumbledore. And then the 7th one, it's finally Harry. How do you get defeated that many times and still be posing a threat?
Right. At some point, you would think he'd be put in lockdown.
Yeah. Eventually, you'd be caught, and you just... How do you not take over a school?
It's a bunch of high
schoolers.
schoolers.
You're more powerful than Dumbledore.
They're like 18 years old. How do you not beat 18-year-olds?
See, but the reason I put him on top 3 is because obviously he's so memorable, and I grew up with Harry Potter pretty much every day of my life.
Right.
In middle school and high school. So that's why he's my number 3.
You know, I had a tough time who I was going to leave out, who I was going to put in, and I think Patrick Bateman kind of narrowly edged a couple of great characters. I'll give you a couple of examples of those who were honorary mention, I would say. One being John/Jigsaw from the Saw movies. Mm-hmm. I mean, just an absolute brilliant mind that's gone absolutely crazy at the same time. Here's another one that I really liked. I thought is a really good bad guy, but just missed the cut. What about Jaws? I think Jaws would be a fantastic example. I was thinking of Jaws myself, and Voldemort just surpassed him because of how much I was into Harry Potter. And I think one more that I think just missed the cut for this list was Bane. I think Bane was a great bad guy, a good follow-up to one of the, like we talked about, one of the best movies of all time. But Bane gets narrowly edged out by the other Batman bad guy for the number 2 spot, and that's Heath Ledger's Joker. And we talked about it, one of the best performances of all time. And had we just be strictly doing this on performances, the Joker would be number 1, hands down, from any kind of villain or bad guy, out of any, I think, movie genre, not even just horror or just action, I think any movie genre ever. The way that Heath Ledger fully submersed himself into that role and later eventually lost his life, I think, was probably very much due to his submersion into that role. But the way that he submersed himself into that role and really played it and really just got into the grit of what the Joker was, that will never be beaten in a Batman series, I think in a superhero series. And if it, like I said, if it was just for role, I don't think it would ever be beaten as a villain ever again. So the Joker sits at number 2 for me.
I had a tough time taking mine as well because I had 2 right off the bat.
I have a feeling that our 1 and 2 might be the same people, just not in the same order. If you have the Joker at 1 or 2.
No, I do not.
Really?
I do not. But my number 2 isn't really a villain
per se.
One person. It's pretty much the entire Dead. I'd have to go with the Deadites from the Evil Dead and Army of Darkness series. I know.
They're horrible movies.
You don't like them. The remake sucked. But think about it this way, Tyler. You have a book of cursed sentences that will bring the dead back, possess the living, and once you've killed them, they go to hell and or go back to possessing the living.
Okay.
How do you win against that? It's just continuous cycles of you kill the dead come back, possess the living, kill that person, possess another person, kill that it doesn't stop.
Well, it's a complete genocide of the human race by humans.
Exactly.
It makes sense. I understand. I'm looking at it from a movie standpoint. I don't like the movies.
You don't like the movies.
But the idea itself is a good idea.
And honestly, they're creepy. They're creepy as hell.
Right.
In the first movie, they just absolutely took it to pure horror, and it worked well. They had a girl with her head cut off, come back to life, and her body chased around the Bruce Campbell with a chainsaw.
Right.
How you beating that? You can't. It's not like a zombie. You took off her head. That should have stopped it, but it didn't. So that's why they're in my number 2.
Number 2. All right, so we'll recap real quick for those of you just tuning in for some reason, clicking at the almost 50-minute mark.
Random marks.
Number 3 for me was Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Number 2 was the Joker from The Dark Knight Rises. For Brandon, number 3 was Lord Voldemort from the Harry Potter series. Number 2 was the Deadite zombies from the Evil Dead series. Now we'll get to number 1. I'm interested here to see if you and I have the same number 1. Because this was the first person I thought of outside of the Joker, because we had already mentioned the Joker. This was the first person that came to mind when you talk bad guys.
I have a feeling we have
villains.
The same person.
Because we've talked about this series before, and we've talked about it pretty extensively. The best bad guy or villain
at the same time?
in all movie history, if you want to do it at the same time, because I think we're agreeing at this point, is ready for this. Is 3, 2, 1.
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader is the best bad guy in the history of movie series because he's ominous, he's powerful, he
gets shit done.
He gets things done. He builds a Death Star, they blow it up, he builds another one.
Just because he could.
And
he almost got it half done.
And then at the end of the day, he kills one of the most powerful Siths in the history of Sithdom.
A lot of people would say, oh, Luke defeated Sith. Vader did.
Vader did at the end of the day.
And think about this. He went from the most pretentious, whiny, piece of crap movie character in all of history to one of the most badass pieces. Just one of the most badass characters ever.
You're right. I completely agree with you. And, for me, the whole black suit and the air mask, everybody has imitated.
Everyone knows the breathing.
And Luke, or everybody says, Luke, I am your father. Even though that's not the
says,
line.
No,
whatever,
I am
it's
your
not
father.
the line, but everybody knows that line. And everybody knows that scene.
Now,
and the dark mask and the dark cape, the all black everything.
Even think of this. We loved Rogue One. It was a great movie. We knew they were all going to die.
Right.
Spoiler alert. But to me, honestly, what was the best scene of that movie?
The last 5 minutes when Darth Vader came in and
the
showed
last
his red
5 minutes,
lightsaber.
It's just a dark corridor. All you hear is, you just hear breathing, and then the red lightsaber just glows, just brightens up the entire room, and Darth Vader goes to town on some rebellion security guards.
That honestly made that entire movie for me. I thought it was a fantastic. I got the chills when that happened.
It was amazing. And
but I think it's pretty easy to say that he's the best villain of all time.
Now, the reason I also thought of Voldemort at my number 3 spot was a picture that said, Voldemort couldn't take over a high school. Sauron almost took over Middle-earth twice. Vader enslaved an entire galaxy for 30-some years.
Right.
And I don't think any villain has ever topped that accomplishment.
I completely agree with you. I think Darth Vader is hands down. I mean, you've got one of the biggest movie series of all times centered around Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm. And he's got one of the coolest voices of all time.
James Earl Jones for the win. I think that'll pretty much wrap things up for us here for this episode of Baron Banter. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to do something a little bit different with our podcast today. At the end, when we upload this to YouTube, we will timestamp everything for you. If you have a series that you particularly liked, we'll do this moving forward. We'll timestamp all the series for you. If maybe you don't want to listen to the politics, but you want to hear the Star Wars, or you don't want to listen to my rant, but you want to listen to politics, we'll have that all for you moving forward from now on. So I think that you got any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Not really.
All right, let's shut this thing down. For Brandon Zulli, my co-host, myself, Tyler Zulli, saying thank you as always for tuning into Baron Banter. We'll see you next Friday.